Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of You Are My Borough with myself, Dom Shaw and Scott Wilson, both from the Northern Echo. How are we doing, Scott? All right?
I'm all right, Dom. Yeah, you?
Sound. Well, we talked last week about the need for Borough to start winning ugly. And then they did that on Saturday against Millwall. We'll look back on that game. We'll look ahead to the festive fixtures, of course, obviously starting at Plymouth this weekend, and have a chat about various other bits and bobs and news lines that are popping up this week. Just a shout, if you haven't already, just to press subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd appreciate that. If you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review there as well. So let's start with that Millwall game, Scott. You were there and job done?
Yeah. I mean, winning ugly's probably right. Maybe a little bit harsh. I thought Borough were the better team. I think if there was going to be a winner, it deserved to be Borough. They played the better football. They created the better chances. It wasn't a game with a whole host of chances. You've got to say that. Obviously, Latalath takes his really, really well. Millwall had two very good chances in the first half, two big saves from Brin. I guess we'll talk about the goalkeeper situation in more depth in a bit, but they were really important saves because, Millwall did create those chances. And then the second half was really a non-event largely, which, to be fair, suited Borough, given that they were ahead. They didn't have to push it. They did create a handful of chances in that second half, but never really looked like adding a second goal. But then on the flip side, Millwall never really looked like getting themselves back into it either. So, you will get games like that in a championship season, and that's exactly what Michael Carrick said after the game. He actually came straight out and said it's actually one of the most pleasing kind of results in my time here, because we haven't played that well. We know we can do an awful lot better, but we found a way to win the game, and that's what Borough did. And there will be times this season when any side who's up there going for promotion will need to do that, and Borough have at least shown that they can do it, because that was a fair question mark, I think, hanging over them. They'd struggled to get clean sheets, they'd struggled to close games out, but they did both of those things at the weekend.
We'll get to the goalkeeper thing, obviously, because that is a big talking point. But when you're talking about why it was one of Carrick's most important wins, well, obviously the manner of the win, but the timing as well. On the back of the Leeds and Burnley games, it just had the feel of one of those games where you just need to get a win, whatever it takes. Yeah,
well, that was exactly it. And, with the whole Neil Harris thing going on with Millwall, it was kind of hard to know exactly what you were going to get from Millwall. Were they going to turn up and be disinterested? Well, they weren't that. Were they going to turn up and be absolutely inspired by it? I wouldn't really say they were that either in the end. But that was an unknown factor going into it. And yeah, you're right. Off the back of losing at Leeds, the fact that the sides up there at the top of the league, by and large, do keep on winning. Borough just couldn't afford to slip any further behind, and they couldn't afford to be going into the Christmas matches off the back of 1 point out of 9 or 2 points out of 9. They needed to get that win, and like I say, fair play to them. On a day when it wasn't really clicking for them, they found a way to do it.
And I think the same goes for Plymouth on Saturday, really, which we'll get to before we wrap up. Obviously, the importance of going there and building on it and getting 3 more points on the board. We're recording on Wednesday lunchtime, and Michael Carrick is speaking at the Riverside this afternoon, which is doubling up as his pre-match presser.
You're heading there. Christmas party time, isn't it?
Yes. So we're over at Rockcliffe yesterday speaking to Johnny Howson, which was good, and then we're
where's the Christmas jumper then? Where's the Santa hat?
Yeah, it is. You know what? I've never had a Christmas jumper.
I cannot believe that.
Honestly, God's honest truth, and I stuck my little lad in one to go to school this morning. Ezra put one on, but I know I've never had one.
I have a pretty shocking array of jumpers and Christmas shirts, but I'll tell you for why. Because for a lot of years, the couple of weeks before Christmas, I always used to go to the darts with my brother down at Ali Pally. Yeah. And while we never went in full-on fancy dress, it was like the most outrageous Christmas jumper, suit, shirt, whatever. That's what we had to do. So hence, I've got a few bands.
Well, to be fair, if you're looking at horrendous selections of jumpers and whatnot, every time we're on a call with our editor, he picks up on something I'm wearing, doesn't he? So
true.
Getting my wardrobe for everyday clobber. No, so I've never had one. So,
but it is Christmas party day at the Riverside today, isn't it? Where Carrick and a few of the players are there to meet some fans and everything, which is always actually, and it was it's a good event to go to.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's always, especially with the young ones that are there, it's always great to see how much it means to them, isn't it? With the players and obviously the
You'll get a
manager.
couple of leftover turkey sandwiches at the end as well, I'm sure.
Well, you would hope so. I haven't had any dinner yet, and actually, we're rushing for time a little bit. It's 1:25. It's there at 2:30, so I might have to get some. It's either going to be that or a Greg's on the way. I think it's always a good alternative. I can't even remember where we started, but yeah. So injury-wise and whatnot, ahead of it, obviously, Ayling went off at the weekend. We don't know on that yet. We might find out this afternoon. We'll see on that. The goalkeeper situation, though, there was no injury there. It was just a case of Brin selected over Dieng. It's going to be interesting moving forward, that one, because if Brin stays in, and he's going to stay in this weekend at Plymouth, isn't he? Undoubtedly on the back of keeping a clean sheet against Millwall and making some saves. When January rolls around, Seny Dieng's not playing.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I'm with you. I think Brin will start at Plymouth. You know, as I say, he made 2 absolutely crucial saves in the early stages of that game last weekend. But then after that, I thought he was really composed. He commanded his area well. Came and caught crosses. And you know, Carrick just said after the game he was really pleased with him. Didn't really want to dwell on the whys and wherefores of Dieng being left out. But I think, you know, we all know the Burnley goal, few incidents in the Leeds game, you know, the previous things already this season. So it's Brin's shirt to lose now. And I think what you would say with Carrick is, you know, all through his reign, he's been pretty consistent in, if you're in the side and you're performing, you'll stay there no matter who else is in and around it. You know, we've seen it even Latalath, we've seen it with McGree. You know, there's very, very few players in this Middlesbrough side that you would deem to be undroppable in Carrick's eyes, if any, to be perfectly honest. And I think the keeper's part of that. So, you know, I think Brin will get his chance. And then, like you say, if he continues taking it, and if he clearly establishes himself as the number one, then, well, Dieng's not going to be happy with that situation for very, very long, you wouldn't have thought.
No matter how much Carrick tries to play it down, it's always a big decision to drop your number one goalkeeper, isn't it? And change your keepers. But I'm delighted for Brin because he's done it the right way, hasn't he? Over the course of the last few years, he's served his time. He's gone out on different loan spells. I think he's a real example of how a young player dealing with it the right way, but also a club like managing the progression of a young player with a bigger picture in mind, because he's had various loan spells, impressed on each. With each one, he's taken the next step forward to the point where this summer just gone, the Championship was the logical next step.
Yeah, and it must be hard being a keeper in that scenario, mustn't it? Because, you know, if you're an outfield player, then you can be in and around it much more. You will get chances off the bench that, you know, you're only ever an injury away from stepping off the bench and being in the side. But even if there aren't any injuries, you're probably going to get 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, quarter of an hour there to at least be part of it. Clearly, if you're a keeper, and especially a young keeper, that's just not the situation. So, as you say, he's had to go out. He's had the loan spells. He's done well everywhere he's been. I think 2 Player of the Year awards at the clubs he's been at. I mean, you clearly can't do any more than that. It's then, are you going to get a chance at Borough? And I think once it, you know, pre-season, the thought was Dieng will be number one, but you had Glover, you had Hemming, and you had Brin. Who is going to be the number 2? Well, it didn't take too far into the season to be able to pretty categorically say, well, Brin is the number 2. And then obviously you then have a genuine chance to become the number 1, which it looks like he's going to take. But yeah, completely agree with you. You know, fair play to Brin for the way he's handled it, and fair play for Borough for, you know, managing the progression. Because, but then having said that, you can manage the progression as well as you like. You still then need the opportunity to put that keeper in, or a manager who's willing to do it. Because, you know, you can argue that Ainsley Pears' progression was managed similarly for a while, but then in the end, Pears simply outgrew the fact that Borough either were unwilling or unable to put him into the team. Well, you know, Carrick, to be fair to him, hasn't hesitated in putting Brin in there, has he?
No, a couple of things on Brin. I remember early in the summer, the word was that he'd come back at the end of last season, hadn't he? Because I think League One had finished a week or 2 earlier.
Yeah, he came trained for like the last week or so, didn't he?
That's right. And made an instant impact there, didn't he? With obviously Borough knew, and Carrick knew what he was capable of, because he'd done the same the year earlier when he came back from Swindon when Borough had made the playoffs. But I think the rate of progression and how much he'd moved on and how much he'd taken the messages on board that Borough wanted him to in that time frame really impressed. And then the second thing, I remember interviewing him at the end of last season, when we were aware of that, when we were aware of how much it impressed, and kind of saying to him then, the logical next step now is the Championship and playing for Borough, is it? And he kind of said, oh, look, like Borough have made really solid decisions so far for my career. Whatever they think's best, I'm happy with, which is the direct opposite of a player coming back and saying, and which isn't necessarily a bad thing if a player comes back and says, right, I feel ready. He clearly did feel ready, but he wasn't the type who was going to go banging the door down and saying, right, if I'm not going to play this year, then that's me. I want to go. I think the other thing with a keeper, though, is maybe they've got a bit more time on the side if you're a keeper, maybe a bit more longevity. But still, when you're 24 and you've had 2 or 3 seasons of playing, the very least you want is to know you're going to be number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And know you're going to, there's a realistic chance that you're going to get that chance. I think that's what you need and want, isn't it? Because, and I guess had that not been the case and had Carrick decided that Glover was going to be the number 2, then Brin would have gone back out again, because clearly, as we're seeing from Hemming as well, the fact that he's gone out, neither of them are going to gain anything whatsoever from being number 3 and just training and, struggling to get into match day squads. So, no, it's interesting. I like you, fully expect to see him between the sticks at Plymouth this weekend and then, perform well there. And you've made a real statement and you've taken your opportunity, haven't you?
And just finally on the keepers, I mean, having Glover as third choice is a big call in itself. He is an Australian international who last Christmas, when Dieng was injured and was going away, was saying that he didn't go away at the Asia Cup because he wanted the gloves. He wanted to be number 1. So that was a big call in itself. Carrick's been pretty ruthless, really, when it comes to goalkeepers. He has not shirked the big calls.
No, he hasn't. No, and it'd be interesting with Glover in January for that very reason, won't it? I mean, is he going to be happy?
The Dieng situation might well change.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
From back to front, let's talk about Delano Burgzorg, because at the start of the season, he started a fair few games. He featured heavily in the early stage of the season, but then probably didn't really overly impress in the early stages of the season. Said the same about Morgan Rogers last year. Then he had a spell out the team. Since he's come back into the team, feels like he's really, well, in the words of Carrick at the weekend, starting to show what he's capable of. In the last 5 games he's started, Borough have won 4 and drawn 1. The 2 games he hasn't started, Blackburn when he was ill and Leeds when he was left on the bench, Borough have lost. Now, I'm sure there's more to it than that, but Riley McGree, when fit, was a pretty nailed-on starter for, 18 months under Carrick? That doesn't feel like the case now, and that's because of Burgzorg. It
is, and he just, he's clearly a very, very different player to McGree, isn't he? And in some senses, what you perhaps lose in terms of defensive security and maybe positional nous that you would probably get with McGree, you gain through Burgzorg a real direct attacking threat. And if you've got him on one flank and Dork on the other flank, then all of a sudden teams are saying, goodness me, we can't really afford to let Borough get the ball out wide. And especially if they're breaking. I mean, counter-attacking wise, having Burgzorg and Dork as your 2 wide attackers, goodness me, that is some threat. So, I think he's definitely given an extra string to Borough's attacking board in terms of just how willing he is to run with the ball. He wants to get a shot off. He wants to create things. As I say, he's direct. He likes to isolate the opposition fullback one-on-one. All of those kind of attributes are probably different to what McGree offers you. So, in some ways, I think it's like we keep going back to, I think it probably will be horses with courses for Carrick. I think there'll be games where the defensive security and the ability to keep a shape that McGree gives you will be important. But I also think there will undoubtedly be games where you want that attacking threat that Burgzorg gives you. And I think early in the season, like you say, he didn't really impress. He didn't hit the ground running. And he'd obviously had the loan at Huddersfield who ended up going down. And I think, to a certain extent, questions were being asked about, well, what have Borough actually seen in him? Well, I think we've seen in the last month what Borough have seen in him, why they brought him in. He definitely adds something to the team when he's in it.
Yeah, and there's a bit of edge there as well.
Yeah.
which I like.
Yeah, and a decent tie-up with Latalath, I think, as well. They seem
Yeah.
to complement each other and dovetail quite well.
On the subject of wingers, reports today that Isaiah Jones might be looking to leave in January. The Football League World are reporting that. Now, it's an interesting one with Jones, isn't it? Because it was only in April that he signed a new 3-year contract, I think it was, at the club. He started the season at right wing, didn't start the season particularly well. Then obviously Ben Doak comes in, and that changes things. Borough in a position where the squad's full, at full capacity. If they want to bring players in January, then clearly they're going to have to trade. And if you're looking at players who potentially might move on, then obviously deals need to work. But Jones has the look of one of those, I think.
Yeah, it has the look of something to me where I don't for 1 minute think Borough will be looking to force him out of the door or anything like that. But I think you're right. I think if a bid lands that works for Jones and that brings a decent chunk of money in for Borough and that frees a squad space for them to be able to tinker and do things elsewhere, I think it's one that they'd pretty seriously look at. It might be influenced a bit by force because, again, are we ever going to see Marcus Force at the level that he was at, staying fit week after week after week and being a genuine starting option on the right-hand side? If the answer to that is yes, then I think you're in a position where you can let Jones go. I think if there are doubts over Force, then it probably becomes that little bit more difficult to let Jones go, because while Borough do have a lot of attacking options, a number of them seem to either prefer or be better on the left. And would probably still have slight question marks over Micah Hamilton and where he's going to end up playing. So there's a few moving parts there. But to go back to where you started, yeah, it would not surprise you if Isaiah Jones was starting to get a bit twitchy about the fact that he's not playing any football for Borough. It wouldn't surprise you if his agents were starting to tout his name around and just see what interest is out there. And like I say, if that interest firms up, it wouldn't surprise you if Borough were at least willing to give it serious consideration and listen to it and see if the deal works for them. Because I'm just looking here, Jones has only started one league game since the Sunderland match in the middle of September. Well, I guess what you would say is Doak, whatever league Borough are in next year, will probably not be a Borough player next season. I don't think I'm saying anything outlandish or shocking there. So, Borough do have to think as well long-term about what's happening down their right-hand side. But if Isaiah Jones isn't the answer at the minute in Carrick's eyes, then he's probably not the answer long-term either, is he?
No, and from what we gather, there's been no firm bids, not bids as such.
No.
The January window hasn't opened, but a kind of firm offers or suggested offers ahead of the window opening. But there would be Championship clubs interested, wouldn't there? There would be Championship clubs undoubtedly at least having the conversation and talking numbers and that sort of thing. Because although Jones hasn't kicked on and hasn't probably managed to hit the heights that he reached under Chris Wilder when he perfectly fit in that 3-5-2 system, he's shown in various flashes that he can be a match winner at this level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
obviously at his troubles, his tough times off the pitch that contributed to that difficult season when Carrick first came in. But even last season, he showed signs of really getting back to somewhat like his best, didn't he?
Yeah, there were flashes last year, definitely, weren't there?
I mean, I remember that Chelsea game when his absence was seen as kind of one of the major contributing factors to Borough's defeat, really, wasn't it? Not the main one, obviously, but the fact that Borough had no outlet. He was playing well at that time.
I mean, I guess what the other thing with Jones is, partly because of those kind of personal mental issues that you touched on there. I mean, he hasn't played regular football now for the best part of 3 seasons.
Yeah, easy.
And clearly that's an issue, isn't it? It's an issue for him. It's an issue for Borough. It's an issue for his career and everything. I mean, would there be any mileage in loaning him out in the second half of the season? Probably not. I think he's at the age where you make a decision on him, don't you? You either want him or you don't. So I couldn't see that. But I think he needs to be playing football again, and if that's not going to be at Borough, then it probably does suit everyone for it to be somewhere else, because at the minute his career's going nowhere, is it?
Plymouth this weekend then. Wayne Rooney's Plymouth. I wonder whether that'll crop up in the conversations with Michael Carrick.
Still Wayne Rooney's Plymouth. There's been a few moments this season when it looked like it might not be for much longer, but it is
Well,
still.
they're winless in 6, aren't they? And the second bottom now, you just wonder whether, I know it's only 4 days before Christmas, but Gary Monk was sacked a day and a half before Christmas.
Tell us about that.
You know,
Yeah.
the kind of suggestions have been from the Plymouth end that no, Rooney will be given time, but I mean, it's looking hairy for him at the minute, isn't it? They're on a bad run of form. The second bottom, the only team below them are Hull, who've obviously just changed the manager. They need to start getting results on the board sooner rather than later. I don't think they'll get one this weekend. I fancy Borough to go and win this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Plymouth obviously started the season dreadfully, and you wondered if Rooney was even going to last to kind of end of September, October. Then they did pick up, didn't they? They had a month, maybe month and a half, where they improved, results improved. You know, the mood music was that Rooney was getting a tune out of them, and it was starting to be easy to see what he was doing and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's fallen off the cliff to a slight extent in the last month and a half, where results have gone back to where they were. So, yeah, I mean, Borough go down there as strong favourites, and absolutely no reason why they can't sign off before Christmas with a win. I mean, before we get to the absolute kind of talking about what's going to happen in the game, Plymouth away the weekend before Christmas. I mean, come on. I know you've got to slot it in somewhere, and there's probably arguments that wherever it falls is going to be difficult and whatever. But for the travel and supporters, I mean, that is just ridiculous.
I'm sure he won't mind me saying I was talking to Nick Waits, who's a Borough fan, big Borough fan, and he never misses a game. And he's do on Friday night before the game, like an annual Christmas event. And I was talking to him yesterday, and then he said he's on the 5:15 train on the Saturday morning to Plymouth. God, I mean, the effort and the fans is just absolutely incredible.
I'm pretty sure I saw him on the platform the other week, actually, when it was that horrendous storm day. Can you remember?
Yeah. Where were Borough that day?
I'm trying to remember.
Where were Borough that day? Where was I? No, Borough played the Friday night at Burnley.
No, not that one. I think I'm thinking of the one when they were at Oxford, aren't I?
I was at Oxford. Well, on the subject of Oxford, I was going to talk about Oxford. They sacked Des Buckingham this week.
Yes.
I mean, again, we've said it before, from the outside looking in, you never want to be too judgmental of managerial exits, because I always talk about the Tony Pulis example and how, from the outside looking in, Pulis had done a solid job at Borough, but by the time he'd gone, Borough fans were ready for change, weren't they? And it was the same at West Brom when he'd been there. But hell, that looks harsh on Buckingham.
Yeah,
what was he doing for Oxford this season?
I mean, it kind of brings you back to the whole Neil Harris Millwall thing from the weekend. And I kind of asked, was in the press conference after the game, and Harris was kind of asked, look, there's all this talk about why you're leaving, behind this or whatever. Like, where should Millwall be? Is it realistic that Millwall can be a Premier League club? Now, he kind of came out with what you'd expect him to come out with. Look, Luton did it last year. The dream's got to be there. But that's all fine. Yeah, I accept all of that. But ultimately, clubs are at a certain level. There is a certain level where you can kind of pigeonhole most clubs, aren't there? And every now and then they'll overachieve that. Every now and then they'll underachieve that, whatever. But, you're talking about Plymouth and Oxford there. Well, is it really realistic to expect that Plymouth and Oxford should be punching so far above their weight that they're in the top half of the Championship, challenging for the Premier League, in with Leeds, in with Borough, in with Sunderland, in with Burnley, in with clubs who have got parachute payments, all of that? Like, I would just say no. So, it's a bit like the Russell Martin at Southampton thing, isn't it? And I know he's been naive, and you can say that Southampton have been pretty shambolic since they've gone up. But if you're a manager of a club that is threatening to seriously punch above its weight, the worst thing you can do is achieve that and get promoted to a league that really is probably above where your team should be, because by the following Christmas, you're going to be out. And to a certain extent, I feel that with Plymouth and Oxford. Now, I know fans at Plymouth and Oxford will say, well, we don't want to be fighting against relegation every season we've got. And I accept that. You can't sell to the fans of those clubs, look, this is your natural position. But you do look at those type of clubs when they're sacking managers because they're going to be involved in a relegation battle. Well, what do you expect Plymouth and Oxford to be in the Championship?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Oxford are 6 points behind Coventry with the game in hand. Now, I know Coventry have sacked their manager, but think of the money Coventry spent. And the job that Buckingham's done there, and it's similar to, I think, Leicester. Like when Steve Cooper went at Leicester. Now, I know there was the previous Nottingham Forest links there, and maybe that was never going to work. But if you're a manager looking to go in at Leicester, and you're thinking, well, they sacked their last manager when they were 16th in the Premier League, when surely in your first season back, 17th would be success. What are going to be the expectations there? Now, managers will always take championship jobs, or certain managers, because how often do they come round? And Gary Rowett appears to be the one who's going to go in there. Apologies if that's already been confirmed by the time you're watching this. Really solid championship manager, done decent jobs at different clubs. But 21st will surely always be success for Oxford in the Championship. No disrespect, not forever, because Luke will punch him with your way. But this season,
exactly. Yeah, and in some ways, that's why what Luton have done by standing by their manager after relegation last season, and you know what has undoubtedly been a poor start this season, you kind of applaud that. You know, when Rob Edwards left the Riverside after that 5-1, I thought he was gone. I thought he was gone the next day. I was amazed he survived the weekend. Well, you know, maybe Luton know that actually, you know, yes, it's been it was a difficult season last season, although they did ever so well up there. It's clearly not been the start that they wanted, but, you know, he's been the right man before. Maybe he's still the right man. Now, you know, the fans have to be on board with that, because if they start making your life really difficult, then it does become difficult. I accept that. And ultimately, you're right. We're speaking from afar. Fans at these clubs know what's actually going on at their clubs. But yeah, having said all of that, mind, I'm now going to contradict myself, because I'd still be surprised if Wayne Rooney's still the Plymouth manager come the end of the season.
Yeah, well, I would. And yeah, I mean, if Borough win there at the weekend, pressure's going to mount. Fair play to Rooney. The last thing on that, fair play to Rooney for taking that job, because think of all he's achieved in the game. And I know, like, professional sports people at the highest level, and not some are, but aren't driven by the finances and what they've already made. Some are achieved by sporting success and sporting glory and wanting to get the most out of themselves. And Rooney is clearly desperate to be a success as a manager, but he didn't need that job, did he? But fair play to him for again, given what he achieved in the game, to take a job at the bottom end of the Championship, where it was always going to be tough. Whoever's gone in at Plymouth this year, survival was going to be the success, wasn't it? So from the outside looking in, obviously not this weekend without sounding very football manager pre-meeting up with a former colleague. I'd really like Rooney to be a success there, but
I would. And like you say, you know, he definitely does deserve a lot of credit for being willing to go in there and do it and try and. I mean, slight similarities. Clearly, listen, I am not for 1 minute suggesting that Lee Cattermole has achieved the same level of success that Wayne Rooney has. Shock. But he went into Bristol Rovers as a set piece coach. And within a week, he's the interim manager.
It wasn't even a week, was it?
You know, I mean, football's strange like that. And you know, I think sometimes you swallow your pride probably wrong, because, you know, being the manager of Plymouth is still being the manager of a championship club and all that kind of stuff. But I think sometimes you've got to accept that, you know, you need to serve your apprenticeship. You need to prove yourself again. You need to show what you can do. And that's what Rooney's doing. And obviously that's what Katz was going to be doing. And now finds himself as an interim boss. You know, that probably won't last very long. He'll go back to the coaching role. But he's someone who clearly is determined to work his way up the coaching ranks and carve out a career in it. And good luck to him as well.
And sometimes you've got to put yourself in the position to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I think of Dimmy at Borough when he was signed to literally make up the numbers in training, really, as an extra goalkeeper. And he ends up as the record-breaking keeper in a promotion-winning team.
You just don't know, do you?
Yeah, that is football, isn't it? At times, it's all on fortune and misfortune.
Yeah.
Best of luck to Lee Cattermole, because when he was at Borough, in the coaching staff at Borough, everything I heard was incredibly positive.
Yeah. Same here. And you know what? we've had experience of covering him with Borough and Sunderland. Just a thoroughly nice lad, nice guy, mad passionate about football. You'd love to see him be a success.
George Friend, director of football. I'd seen Aitor had been very briefly installed as odds-on favourite to go in there.
Really?
The band back together. But then
that would be something, wouldn't it?
I'd seen something from a guy who covers him.
What's Vin Valdez doing now? Counting his millions, I suspect.
Antonio Barragan, set piece coach. I'd seen I'd seen something from a guy who covers him saying that he's working for UEFA, so that won't happen because of that. And then when I looked, he just tweeted in both of his English and Spanish accounts that he'd been over to China to deliver a coaching course or speech or something there. So the life of the high rollers in the UEFA coach.
Exactly.
Finally, then, prediction Saturday. What you're saying? I'll go 3-1 Borough.
3-1's normally my scoreline, isn't it?
But I won't go into details of goals.
It sounds very feasible. I'll go 2-3. Proper end-to-end pre-Christmas cracker.
We'll end it there then. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will do vids and pods over the Christmas week, obviously, but because of timing and pressers and games and whatnot, we're not exactly sure when they're going to fall yet. So if we don't do one before Christmas, we will try to, but if we don't, have a lovely Christmas. Enjoy. But we will speak at some point before the end of next week. Safe travels if you're heading to Plymouth at the weekend. Long trip, but enjoy it. Hopefully you get a result down there, and we'll speak again next week. Take care.